The rejection. The central spire of the Galactic Assembly rose 3 kilometers into the artificial atmosphere of Station Prime. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from 400 civilizations gathered for what many considered the most important vote in 10,000 years. Would humanity, the youngest spacefaring species, be granted full membership in the ancient alliance that governed the known galaxy? Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the designated platform for provisional members, her dark eyes scanning the vast amphitheater. Beside her, General James Walker maintained his military bearing despite the weight of the moment. They had prepared for this day for 7 years, navigating the complex web of galactic politics, proving humanity's worth through countless demonstrations of goodwill and cooperation. The Primarch, a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical shell pulsed with azure light as it called for order. Its voice resonated through every translator in the chamber simultaneously. The vote regarding humanity's ascension to full membership will now commence. All delegates will register their decision. Sarah watched as lights began appearing across the chamber. Green for acceptance, red for rejection, yellow for abstention. At first, the green seemed promising, scattered throughout the lower tiers where younger species held their seats. But as the voting progressed upward through the more established civilizations, a sea of red began to dominate. The Corvani delegation, insectoid beings with compound eyes that reflected rainbow patterns, cast their red vote with visible satisfaction. Their speaker, a creature Sarah had tried unsuccessfully to befriend for years, chittered something to its companions that didn't require translation to understand as mockery. When the final tally appeared in the air above them, Sarah felt her heart sink but kept her expression neutral. The numbers were devastating. Only 97 species had voted in favor, while 283 had voted against. The rest had abstained, too fearful of either outcome to take a stand. The Primarch's light dimmed momentarily before brightening again. The motion fails to achieve the required 2/3 majority. Humanity's petition for full membership is denied. They shall remain provisional members with restricted access to advanced technologies and limited voting rights. This matter may be reconsidered in one standard galactic century. General Walker placed a subtle hand on Sarah's elbow, a reminder to maintain composure. She stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber without any trace of the disappointment burning in her chest. The delegation from Earth acknowledges the Assembly's decision. We thank those who supported our petition and respect the choice of those who did not. The Zephrani representative, a serpentine being whose scales shifted through various hues, rose from its coiled position. Perhaps this outcome is for the best. Humanity has shown remarkable growth, but your species exhibits troubling characteristics. Your expansion rate exceeds acceptable parameters. Your military development, despite our restrictions, continues at an alarming pace. And your tendency toward independent action suggests you are not ready for the responsibilities of full membership. Sarah nodded slowly, her mind already working through the implications. We understand your concerns, Representative Silthan. Humanity will take this time to reflect on the Assembly's wisdom. The Corvani speaker clicked its mandibles in what passed for laughter among its kind. See how quickly they accept defeat? This proves they lack the strength to stand among us as equals. Let them serve another century in their proper place. Neither Sarah nor Walker responded to the insult. They simply gathered their materials and began the long walk out of the chamber. Behind them, many representatives were already celebrating, confident they had successfully kept the upstart humans in check. They failed to notice the meaningful glances exchanged between the human delegates, or the way Sarah's fingers moved across her communication device in a predetermined pattern. As they reached the doors, the Primarch called out one final time. Ambassador Chen, the Assembly trusts humanity will continue its contributions to galactic prosperity despite this setback. Sarah turned, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Humanity always honors its commitments, Primarch. Every single one of them. The walk back to the human sector of Station Prime took 20 minutes through corridors filled with representatives from various species. Some offered sympathetic glances, others barely concealed their satisfaction. Sarah and Walker maintained their dignified silence until they reached the secure conference room where the rest of the human delegation waited. The moment the door sealed, the carefully maintained facades dropped. Dr. Michael Torres, head of the scientific delegation, looked up from his tablet. The vote went exactly as our models predicted, 89% accuracy on individual votes. Sarah sank into a chair, finally allowing her exhaustion to show. Then we proceed with Protocol 7. Walker nodded grimly. The authorization came through from Earth the moment the vote concluded. Every human installation, every research facility, every joint project begins withdrawal procedures immediately. Dr. Lisa Park, the economic advisor, pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy's trade routes. They want us to remain as second-class citizens, providing our innovations and resources while being denied equal say in how they're used. They're about to learn what losing human cooperation really means. Sarah stood, her exhaustion replaced by determination. Send the message to all human colonies and installations. Operation Sovereign Dawn is now in effect. We gave them 7 years to accept us as equals. Now they'll have centuries to regret their decision. Within hours, the first reports began reaching the assembly. Human scientists were leaving joint research facilities, taking their notes and discoveries with them. Human engineers were shutting down fusion reactors they had designed and maintained. Human agricultural advisors were departing worlds that had come to depend on their expertise for food production. The Thrakari, a species of traders who had voted against humanity, were the first to feel the economic impact. 3 major shipping routes they relied on were operated by human companies, who announced they would only service human colonies going forward. The panic in Thrakari markets was immediate and severe. On the medical station orbiting Kepler 442, Dr. Chen Wei led his team in carefully packing away the revolutionary cancer treatment they had been developing. The treatment could work on dozens of different species, potentially saving millions of lives. His Vormac colleague, Dr. Trithan, watched in disbelief. "You cannot simply leave," Dr. Trithan protested, his forearms gesturing frantically. "We are so close to completion. Think of all the lives we could save." Dr. Wei paused in his packing, genuine regret in his voice. "I've thought of nothing else for 3 years, old friend, but my government's position is clear. Our innovations will now benefit humanity first and exclusively. Perhaps in 100 years, when we're reconsidered for membership, we can resume our partnership. But beings will die without this treatment." Dr. Trithan's voice broke with emotion. "Doctor, why sealed another container? And humanity will continue to be treated as inferiors without equal representation. The assembly made their choice. We're simply accepting it." Similar scenes played out across thousands of locations. The Galactic Assembly had spent decades integrating human innovations into their infrastructure without truly acknowledging how dependent they had become. Human-designed quantum processors controlled traffic systems on major trade routes. Human agricultural techniques had increased crop yields by an average of 60% on colony worlds. Human medical knowledge had led to breakthrough treatments for diseases that had plagued some species for millennia. And now, piece by piece, humanity was withdrawing it all. The Assembly called an emergency session just 3 days after the vote. The Primarch's energy form flickered with what observers recognized as agitation. Reports indicate humanity is withdrawing from 843 joint ventures. This appears to be a coordinated response to the membership vote. Kridai, Zephrani representative Silthan uncoiled partially in alarm. They cannot simply abandon their commitments. There are contracts, agreements. From the provisional member platform, Deputy Ambassador Robert Sterling responded calmly. "We are honoring all contracts to their exact specifications. However, you'll find that most expire within the next 60 days, and we will not be renewing them. As provisional members with restricted rights, we've decided to focus our resources on internal development." The Kravani speaker's compound eyes glittered with anger. "This is economic warfare. You seek to punish the Assembly for its democratic decision." Sterling shrugged slightly. "The Assembly voted that humanity isn't ready for full participation in galactic society. We're simply accepting that judgment and withdrawing to focus on our own development." Surely that's what you wanted? To limit our influence? Murmurs rippled through the chamber as representatives began to truly understand what was happening. Humanity wasn't throwing a tantrum or making threats. They were simply, methodically, legally withdrawing from a system that had rejected them as equals. The consequences. 6 weeks after the failed vote, the true scope of humanity's withdrawal became undeniable. Production facilities on 12 major industrial worlds had ground to a halt without human-maintained equipment. 3 species faced agricultural crises as crop yields plummeted without human-developed fertilizers and techniques. Most critically, the quantum communication network that connected the galaxy was experiencing cascading failures. Director Koloth of the Vaxari hegemony stood before the assembly, his chitinous form trembling with barely controlled rage. My worlds are experiencing food shortages. The humans removed their atmospheric processors without warning. From his position, Deputy Ambassador Sterling consulted his tablet. According to our records director, we provided 90 days' notice as required by contract. Your people chose not to train on the equipment maintenance during that time, assuming we would continue. Regardless of the vote, the Primarch pulsed urgently. This situation has escalated beyond acceptable parameters. The Assembly demands humanity resume its previous level of cooperation. Sterling stood, his voice carrying an edge of steel the Assembly had never heard from a human representative before. The Assembly denied humanity equal membership. You declared us unready for full participation. We have accepted your judgment. Our resources and knowledge will now serve human interests exclusively, as is our right as a sovereign species. The Melody representative, whose crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies, chimed in desperately. But the medical research. Billions of lives depend on human innovations. Sterling's expression softened slightly. Humanity regrets any suffering that results from this transition. However, we spent 7 years sharing our knowledge freely, only to be told we're too dangerous, too independent, too fast-growing to be trusted as equals. The Assembly made clear that our contributions are welcome, but our voice is not. We've simply decided our contributions are no longer available. The tipping point came when the Corvani, the same species that had mocked humanity's defeat, decided to test human resolve through military action. A fleet of 15 Corvani warships approached the human colony of New Horizon, a world rich in rare minerals that the insects had long coveted. Admiral Cathan transmitted his ultimatum across all channels. Human colonists, by order of the Galactic Assembly Security Council, this world is being requisitioned for proper resource management. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. The response came from Captain Maria Santos aboard the human destroyer Resilience. Admiral Cathan, New Horizon is a sovereign human colony. Any attempt to seize it will be considered an act of war. I strongly advise you to reconsider. The Corvani Admiral's laughter was a series of sharp clicks. 1 destroyer against 15 cruisers? Have humans lost their minds along with their membership bid? Captain Santos smiled coldly. Admiral, you might want to check your long-range sensors. Suddenly, space around the Corvani fleet seemed to ripple. 40 human vessels dropped out of stealth mode, surrounding the alien fleet in a perfect sphere. But these weren't the patrol ships and frigates the galaxy expected humans to have. These were battleships and carriers of a design no alien species had seen before. Admiral Cathan's compound eyes widened in shock. This is impossible. Provisional members are restricted from building capital ships. Admiral Jonathan Hayes, commanding the human fleet from the battleship Determination, opened a channel. The restrictions apply to technology you provide, Admiral. These ships are entirely human-designed and built. Did you really think we spent 7 years sharing our civilian technology without developing military capabilities to protect ourselves? The human ship's weapon systems came online, energy readings that made the Corvani sensors scream warnings. The technology was different from anything in the Assembly's databases, clearly the product of independent human innovation. Stand down, Admiral Cathan, Hayes commanded. This is your only warning. The Corvani fleet held position for 30 seconds before beginning to retreat. As they withdrew, Admiral Cathon sent a tight beam transmission back to the assembly. The humans had been preparing for this all along. The emergency session that followed was unlike any in the assembly's 10,000-year history. Representatives shouted over each other, panic replacing the usual ordered debate. The revelation of humanity's hidden military strength combined with their economic withdrawal had created a crisis that threatened the stability of galactic civilization. The Primarch struggled to maintain order. The humans have deceived us, they hid their true capabilities. Sarah Chen had returned to Station Prime for this moment. She stood at the provisional member platform, but this time there was no deference in her posture. The assembly seems to misunderstand the situation. Humanity hid nothing. We followed every restriction placed upon us regarding the technology you provided. We simply chose to develop our own alternatives independently. Surely the assembly isn't suggesting that independent innovation is forbidden. The Zephrani representative Silthan hissed in frustration. You planned this from the beginning. You knew we would reject you. Sarah shook her head. We hoped for acceptance, but we prepared for rejection. Your own words during the vote made it clear that you feared human independence and growth. Did you really expect us to remain dependent on your technology and goodwill after being told we weren't worthy of equal standing? The melody representative resonated with distressed harmonics. What do you want from us? For the first time since the crisis began, Sarah smiled genuinely. Nothing. That's what the assembly fails to understand. We don't want anything from you anymore. Humanity will develop independently, trade with species that treat us as equals, and protect ourselves from those who don't. You voted to keep us at arm's length. We're simply honoring your wishes. The Primarch's energy form flickered rapidly. But galactic civilization will collapse without human cooperation. General Walker, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. With respect, Primarch, that sounds like the Assembly's problem to solve. You've managed for 10,000 years without humanity. Surely you can continue. The truth was becoming undeniable. In just 50 years, humanity had become integral to galactic civilization. Their innovations, their drive, their unique perspective, had revitalized stagnant systems and solved problems that had persisted for millennia. The Assembly had been so focused on controlling human growth that they hadn't realized how dependent they'd become on human creativity. Dr. Torres presented a final piece of information that sent shockwaves through the chamber. As of this morning, 15 species have approached humanity directly about bilateral trade and research agreements outside of Assembly oversight. It seems not everyone agrees with your assessment of humanity's worth. The younger species, those who had voted for human membership, were already adapting to the new reality. They saw opportunity where the established powers saw only threat. Within days, that number would grow to 30, then 50, as species chose prosperity over politics. The Corvani speaker, who had been silent since their fleet's humiliation, finally spoke. You've destroyed everything. The order that has maintained peace for millennia. Sarah's response was measured but firm. We've destroyed nothing. We've simply chosen a different path. The Assembly is free to continue as it always has, just without human involvement. If that causes problems, perhaps you should ask yourselves why you became so dependent on a species you considered too dangerous to trust. 3 months later, the galaxy had reorganized itself into 2 loose coalitions. The traditional Assembly continued with its established members, struggling to maintain systems that had grown dependent on human innovation. The Terran Alliance, as it came to be known, included humanity and 63 other species that chose partnership over prejudice. The Assembly tried economic sanctions but found that humanity's resource independence made them ineffective. They considered military action, but the demonstration at New Horizon had shown that humanity's hidden strength was far greater than anyone had imagined. In the end, they were forced to accept the new reality. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of humanity's new diplomatic station, looking out at the ships coming and going. Half bore Assembly registration, coming to trade for resources and technology they could no longer do without. The other half belonged to Alliance, members species that had chosen to see humanity as partners rather than threats. General Walker joined her at the viewport. Any regrets about how things turned out? Sarah considered the question. We offered them partnership and they chose dominance. We showed them cooperation and they saw weakness. Sometimes the best response to rejection isn't anger or revenge, it's simply success on your own terms. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about humanity. They were indeed dangerous, not because of their weapons or their ambition, but because of their ability to thrive independently when pushed aside. The peace talks had failed, but from that failure, humanity had forged something better, a future where they controlled their own destiny among the stars. The Assembly would eventually come to understand what they had lost in rejecting humanity. But by then, humanity had moved beyond needing their approval. They had found their own way, and in doing so, had changed the galaxy forever. The peaceful species they had tried to control had become the independent power they had feared, not through conquest, but through the simple act of walking away and succeeding on their own terms.